Today is my great honor and pleasure to welcome Jason Fried. Jason is the co-founder of 37 Signals, and which now are known as well, especially as Basecamp, has written amazing books like Rework, like Remote. It doesn't have to be crazy at work. Seems extremely very timely in this current circumstances. I know Jason from Chicago Times, so we just said it's like a solid, like it must be 15 years now since I first had him as a special guest speaker in class. So Jason, so happy and so honored to have you.
Well, it's great to be here again and nice to see you after all this time.
Jason, very briefly, take people, I mean, you much known as well, and Basecamp is known, but tell us a bit about the founding story and your personal way into entrepreneurship.
Sure. Well, Basecamp, originally we were called 37 Signals, and we launched the business in 1999. We were just a website design company. I was doing website design on my own, freelance. My two other partners were doing website design or design on their own as well, or with bigger companies. And we all kind of quit doing what we were doing individually and came together to start this business in 99. And then a few years later, we started getting really busy with our web design work. And we decided to build something to keep better track of the work that we were doing, manage the work that we were doing, and get feedback from clients on the record and know who was doing what when and who's responsible for what and all that stuff, the things that you need to do for projects. And we couldn't find anything that we liked. So we ended up building our own tool, which we eventually started using with our clients. And they kept asking about this thing, like, I want to use this too for our own projects. And maybe there's something here. So we turned it into a product and released it in February 2004, called it Basecamp. And about a year and a half later, it was making more money for us than our website design business. So we stopped doing website design and have been doing software ever since. We've released a bunch of different products over the years. Basecamp is now version 3, we're working on version 4 right now. And we also just released a new product called Hey, HEY.com, which is a new email service just this year. So we're trucking along, writing books, doing software, running things our own way, being as independent as we can, and enjoying it all every day as much as we can.
Mm-hmm. Super exciting to see. Here, this as well in the podcast, we really want to help people start companies and get started. And I say it's the personal pursuit of independence, your personal declaration of independence to start your own thing. Oftentimes, one critical thing is the co-founder. You said you had two other co-founders early on. How did you meet them? Was it just natural? Were there more that you potentially considered? How did you hone in on these two other co-founders early on?
Didn't think much about it. Ernest, who was one of my co-founders, he was actually, when I was working on my own as a freelancer, I decided at some point, maybe I shouldn't work on my own. Maybe I should get a job. I was getting bored working by myself out of my 1-bedroom apartment. I'd get up, I'd roll over to my desk and just like wouldn't see anybody all day for weeks. It wasn't healthy, right? So I said, maybe I should get a job. So I interviewed at a big web design company called Organic Online, which is a big web design shop here in the US. I think they were primarily based out of San Francisco, but they're opening a Chicago office where I lived. And Ernest was the creative director over there. And so I met with him and interviewed, and I really liked him. I didn't accept the job, but I really liked him. We kind of kept in touch. Then both of us had a mutual friend, a fellow named Carlos Segura, who was a graphic designer, who was a traditional print designer looking to get into website design. And so Ernest and I kept in touch, and about a year later after I'd interviewed, he was ready to leave Organic. He didn't really like working for a big company. He wanted to start his own thing. I was still working on my own in isolation. I'm like, why don't we work together? And Carlos wants to do something. Let's the three of us work together. We all know each other. Let's start something together. So that was it. I mean, like most things in my business life and life in general, I don't try not to overthink it too much. Just like, I like these people. I think we can do good work together. Let's see where it goes. And about a year later, after we started the business, Carlos left. And then a few years after that, Ernest left. And then I was on my own for a while. And then I eventually brought on David Henmeyer Hansen as a partner after I'd hired him as a contractor and then an employee. But I'm great friends with Ernest and Carlos. So like, even though we don't work together anymore, we're all great friends. We just kind of parted ways because we had different ideas in life and wanted to do different things. And that was fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Life's dynamic then as such as well. No? And Um, to actually going back to the founders topic as well, and then okay, you have these people that you can imagine working well with. Did you then as well start a company right away? Did you call it a company? Then no, because then there's all this question for many people. I don't even know how to deal with taxes and accounting and all of that.
Yeah, great questions. Yeah, it was a company. We called a hang on one second. Sorry. We called an attorney that we knew, and he drew up a very simple agreement. It was, we each put in $10,000 of our own money as our sort of seed money. We've got a bank account. I mean, it wasn't complicated, but we did that, and then we just figured it out from there. We originally started the business as an S corp in the U.S., and then a number of years later, we switched it over to an LLC. So we didn't really think too much about like how should this be structured and what's the best plan. We just like, we need we got to get a business license. We got to get can't get a bank account until we have this. So let's get this done. And you just kind of figure out as you go. Frankly, it's not a big deal. And then if you need to make a change, you make a change. It's anything, any agreement that's written can be rewritten. Any contract can be rewritten as long as the people agree on the changes. So we didn't really worry too much about it, but we needed some stuff to get going.
Oftentimes, though, when these founders then later on split, and so it can be as well quite emotional, quite tense at times as well. No, I think it's great in your case that you split in a very friendly, positive way.
Yeah.
How do you think about vesting? So where you basically say, okay, if somebody leaves, then there's all these conditions in place to sort, let's say, a stock out, to give shares back, and we encourage people to just look into that. So if you don't know what vesting is, for people out there, check it out. Just Google vesting. How do you think about that? Is that important? Or?
Yeah, at the time we didn't think about it at all. We kind of like just decided that we would figure it out we didn't even think about like what would happen if one of us left. It's just like we're building a business. Let's just think about that part. So Carlos left, about a year-ish in, right? And we gave him his $10,000 back, and he's like, "That's fair, fine." The company wasn't worth anything. It's like he's got his money back, basically. And then Ernest, when Ernest left a few years later, it was just me and him, and we just split whatever cash we had in the bank, and like, here's your half, and I'll keep mine in the business. And that was that. So like, it was very amicable, very straightforward, very simple. The company wasn't worth anything. It was just a few of us doing website design. So we had some cash here, take your cash back. And that's kind of how we did it. Now, that may not be the way it has to work. There might be other ways to do it. And in fact, my recommendation might be wrong, which is like, maybe you should set all this stuff up ahead of time, because splitting can be really contentious and really difficult. Totally. But I think what's more important is making sure that you're going into business with the right people who are reasonable. And that is the fundamental thing, because no matter what it says on the piece of paper, if you're dealing with reasonable people, you just work it out. And we were able to work it out and remain friends, and everyone was happy. So that's kind of how we did it.
Oftentimes, though, the coming back to the founder's role, because it's so critical to find the co-founder of Pep. No, you said as well, hey, don't overthink it, just do it. But no, there is this core question, like, who should I found with?
I do think, let me add something. I do think it is very, very important to make sure that whoever you're going to start a business with or co-founder, like, that you really have a good feel for who they are. Ernest and I'd known Carlos for a while. Ernest knew Carlos, but Ernest and I didn't know each other that well, but we kept in touch for a year. And through that year, we began to develop a certain rapport and a certain trust for one another. And we saw certain things the same way. And you get a feel for someone. So it's not like I went to a networking event, met somebody who had a skill that I didn't have, and like, hey, let's start a business together. I mean, it wasn't like that. It was a year of getting to know each other. And then at that point, feeling like I can trust this person. They felt like they could trust me. And we knew we could trust this other person who we both knew. It's very, very important not to go into business with the wrong person. That's just like how most businesses fall apart. Like you just pick the wrong partner and it's over. It's no different than any relationship.
And it can be such
People
a
have to
shame
work.
because at times people are building exciting products and so on. And you think, oh my God, what's going on here? And it's just, well, it's the human side of things.
Yeah, it is. And it's the hardest part of it all. It's like people think product market fit and sale, like those things are hard. The hardest thing, if you're going to go into business with someone else, is that person. Like finding the person that you can agree with on enough things, but disagree with on a few things in the right way, where you can have productive, constructive conversations and you can both make each other better. Like that's really what this ultimately, that's the hardest part and the most important part. So I don't want to glaze over the fact that I just found these two guys who started a business. Like we knew each other for a while before we did that.
Mm-hmm. And I remember like one saying from you, like a solid, it must be again 15 years back, is don't create companies, like build like projects first. Like why think so much about that? So could it be then as well to just say, okay, maybe just start a project and see where it goes? Because I definitely know here at business school, we see so many people that want to create companies, but then actually I'd say most people lose that enthusiasm in the first month or so. So I'd say don't overthink it as well. In a way, just keep going, and later on you can figure out other things in the process.
I think that's actually really good advice. Entrepreneurs especially get really excited about companies for some, like they want to be in business and they want to like, okay, building the company, like that's not the hard part. Like if you're going to build something, like a company is just a formal structure. It's just it's a formalized thing. Like you got to do the work, you got to build the product, you got to, customer service, you got to think about servicing customers, you got to find like, and I just said like that stuff's hard. The hardest thing is still finding the right founder. But after that, like you got to build something. And a lot of entrepreneurs love to think about the company as the only thing that matters to them. But like you got to make something too that people are willing to buy, that funds the company. So yeah, I do think it's a good idea to work together on something first. For example, with David, my current business partner, when we built Basecamp, the product together, David was just a student at a Copenhagen Business School in Denmark. And I hired him for, he only had 10 hours a week. And we built Basecamp as a side project before we realized that actually ended up being the company many years later. So he was not a partner. He was a contractor. Then eventually after he graduated, I hired him as an employee. And then later on, we became partners, but it took a long time for that to happen. We had to make sure we were right for each other to do this kind of stuff. So I do think it's a good idea just to start simple, build something. Most things aren't going to work out anyway. So why go through all the hassle and trouble to like build a formal company that may not work because the product itself may not work. Mm-hmm. Get some experience working together.
Last question on this founding team configuration issue, because you then went through founding with kind of in a 3-person configuration and being the sole founder for some time, then taking David on as a business partner as well. So it's kind of like this dual, let's say, co-founder dynamic. Any advice or reflection for you personally on should people go all in by themselves? Is it much better to have a co-founder? Does it depend on the person, on your personal preferences?
It's a good question. My dad always told me never to go into business with somebody else because he'd seen a bunch of partnerships fail, right? That was his experience. And so everyone's going to have their own experience. I worked on my own for many years before I hooked up with these other people. And that technically didn't work in a sense because like Carlos left and Ernest left a few years later. So if I was going on what my dad said in my first experience, I would say never go into business with anybody else. But now I've got a great business partner and it works out great, So I don't know. I guess I wouldn't worry too much about what you're supposed to do. Like maybe that's my advice is like, someone tells you to do this or not to do that. It's like, you got to figure out what works for you. Every situation is going to be different. Timing and luck play a huge role in all of this anyway. So many of the things that contribute to your success or failure have nothing to do with anything you can control even. So who knows? I feel like if you are going to find a partner though, you want to find someone who's complementary. You don't want to find two people who can do the same thing. So in my opinion, like two designers probably shouldn't start a design firm. You probably don't need two. David's technical, I'm not. We both have a very good head for business though. So we have this like shared thing that we can figure out together. And then David handles the technical stuff and I handle the design stuff. So like we're complementary. We provide each other we fill each other's gaps basically. That I think is a good partner. And then we probably see eye to eye on 80% of things and then maybe totally disagree on a few percent, but then the stuff the remaining, like we don't agree on, but we can debate it and come out with something better. Like that to me feels like a pretty good mix. Mm-hmm. So it's not so much like should you or shouldn't you or whatever. It's like you got to find the right person in the right circumstances with the right timing, who's complementary to you. There's all these things, but you can also just go on your own and see how far you can get by yourself and see what happens.
Uh-huh. One you have these two roles, the tech side, the product, the design side. One side that typically as well is kind of has a role is marketing and sales. How do you think about that, having somebody on the team that's marketing and sales focused?
Yeah, we don't have we've never had salespeople at Basecamp or 30. So we've always built something. We've always basically relied on word of mouth and organic growth. That's just us. And we do that because we are very outspoken. We share a lot. We've written a bunch of books. We have a popular blog, which we've been writing for 20 years. And so we are able to generate our own interest. And then we can talk about our products and people find out about them and they tell other people about them and the whole thing. We do have a marketing person now, which we hired a year ago, but that's 21 years in business before we hired a marketing person, really, basically. So I think it's important for the founder or founders to know how to sell. I think they should be doing all of the selling early on. So it's not that sales, but by selling in our world, our products are self-service. So we're not out there like selling them in a traditional sense. But in my world, selling means like explaining the product well, communicating what the product does, telling a story, making a website that gets people excited about the product, showing it off in certain ways. Like that's sales too. So we're not going door to door. We're not having like sales calls and stuff, but how to explain the thing and put it in context and perspective is what sales is about. To me, that's the founder's job. The founder can't do that. I think you're in trouble. So the founder has to be, I think, the best salesperson for the company. Mm-hmm. And then eventually you can maybe bring on other people, but I would not bring that role on immediately. Personally, I think the founder needs to do that initially.
Because many people as well dream of, hey, I'm so passionate about the product. I want to build product and then get somebody just, to just sell it, sales monkey almost type of thing. And you say, hey, that's maybe not the way to think about it.
I don't think it is. I mean, it could work that way, certainly. But in my opinion, the idea that like, I'll make it and let them sell it is such a, it's sort of separating your responsibility from your title. Like if you own the company and you're making the thing, you should be able to sell it. You should be able to explain it. You're going to be the most passionate. You're going to know the best. You're going to know why you built it better, more than anybody else. I feel like just let them do it is kind of like outsourcing the most important thing you're doing, which is like talking about the product and getting people fired up about it. You should be able to do that. It's not that you have to do it forever.
Somebody else between the customer and you, as the co-founder then as well. In a way, it's almost like an outsourced sales organization type of mental mindset potential I could see.
Yeah, I think you want to talk to your customers early on. You want to be very connected. Like when we launched Basecamp, I also did all the customer service for the first year or two. Like I answered all the emails. Like that was my job too. And it helped a lot. It was a lot of work. Eventually we hired someone to run support, but at the time it was just me doing it. And I learned a lot from it. And, it's not something I wanted to do forever, but I think it's really important. So I just think it's important for everybody to do, this comes back to hiring too. I think it's before you hire anybody for a role, somebody who already exists at the company should try to do that role. That's how you really understand who you need to hire and if they're any good or not. So if you've never done sales, how do you hire a salesperson? You don't know how to evaluate that person. If you've done sales for a year, like kind of the way, selling, or you've done customer service, it's a lot easier to evaluate whether or not someone would be a good customer service person or someone would be a good salesperson. If you haven't done those roles, it's very hard to evaluate those roles. That's why I think it's so important for the founder, especially to do as many of the things they initially need to do, so they understand the roles better when they eventually then go out and hire for them. Because you do need to eventually delegate, and if you're going to grow your business, you can't do it all, nor should you. But initially, you should do as much as you can, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It also keeps your costs down, which is key.
Sorry.
It also keeps your costs down, which is important. Like the biggest cost center when you start a business is going to be salaries initially. And, you go from 2 people to 3 people, that's a big cost jump right there. If you can just keep it at 2 for a while and just kind of figure it out, it's much easier to get to profitability and then feel more comfortable and feel like you're okay. Now we're a little bit more settled here. We can run a little bit longer before we have to do something else. So I just think, hiring too many people early on puts a lot of pressure on you to make a lot of money early, which is really difficult. So I would keep the payroll as low as you can, which means as few people as you can initially.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. You started with itching your own or scratching your own itch in that sense, seeing the need and then developing something for that need, a product that then other customers that you had in the design world wanted as well. How important is that to scratch your own itch, or would you say as well? Well, it happened for us, but I could see definitely as well that you can start other projects, not being basically the customer yourself.
In my opinion, the best products, well, this actually isn't, well, yeah, it's my opinion, but my observation better is that the best products I've ever used across every category, this isn't just software, it's software, hardware, cars, whatever it might be, are built by people who wanted that thing to exist in the world. I've got a coffee grinder it's called the Monolith, by this guy who lives in Seattle. And it's exceptional. And it's built by this guy who wanted this thing to exist because he hated all the other grinders that existed. Like, it's so well built and can only be built by someone who truly has experienced all these other things and goes, no, they're not good. Here's how I want to make mine good. Like, when you use that thing, you go, this guy just gets it. And I have a coffee machine called the Decent Espresso Machine. Decent is the name of the brand. They're based in Hong Kong. Similar thing. It's huge. It's super interesting, really innovative, totally different. And it's built by an enthusiast who just wanted something to exist in the world that didn't exist. And the same thing is true for so many things. Those are the products that I gravitate to. I think they're so much better in sometimes very subtle ways and other times very overt, obvious ways, but they're better. So I do believe that if you want to have a chance of building something really great, you want to build it for yourself first. You want this thing, you want it for yourself. You want to be the first customer of this thing. And it pains you that the world doesn't have this thing. In my opinion, that's giving you the best shot of making something great. It's not that you can't make something great if you build on behalf of other people, but I think you have a better shot at building something great if you build it for yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Many people then struggle with, no, I don't have the co-founder to actually build it with. I like the tech co-founder. Any advice on how to find a tech co-founder these days?
It's hard. I mean, I know what you're saying. And I would say, like, what I hear from when you say that is I hear an excuse, not from you, but like in general, like, I can't start without a co-founder. I can't do this without this. I can't, like,
or let's say not co-founder, but developer in general. Any advice? I mean,
someone.
You guys have a great brand, so you have a lot of inbound kind of
we
applications.
We didn't when we first started. So
right.
Here's how I started. I wanted something to exist in the world. This is back in high school. I wanted, I had a bunch of music. I had a music collection, CDs and tapes and stuff. And I wanted a better way to organize those CDs and tapes because I was loaning them out to friends and I wasn't getting them back. So I forgot who I loaned them out to, and I forgot what my collection, what I had and everything. And I wanted a system to organize my music. And I had to build one because nothing existed that I liked. I didn't know how to program. I had no idea what I was doing. but I learned how to build something. I used something called FileMaker Pro, which was not a programming language, but it was like it's like almost like a no code environment in a sense. It's a database where you can make your own interface and link things up. You have to understand how to link things together, and you got to understand how databases work to a certain degree. But I reached for whatever tools I could find to build whatever I needed. And that's when I learned. And then after that, I built a few more of those. And eventually I wanted to make these web-based applications because these were like local FileMaker apps. And so I had one called, I had one to organize my book collection, and I had this idea to make this a web-based thing. So FileMaker Pro didn't really work in the web, so I had to learn PHP at the time. And so I learned PHP, barely enough to make something sort of kind of work. And then I got stuck. I couldn't get any further. And guess who reached out to me after I posted a thing on our blog, on our blog? I said, like, I'm stuck. I need help. David Hannemeyer Hansen, this kid who I was basically a kid too, right? Who read our blog, who goes, I know PHP, I can help you with that. And that's how I met David. I met David by attempting to do something myself and getting as far as I possibly could until I couldn't get any further. I think that I had to make the effort to meet David. I had to make the effort by trying myself. And that's just one story, but I do think there's something that comes from just giving it a shot and getting as far as you can. At some point, I handed the technical reins over to David, and he rewrote the thing and built the thing because I couldn't get any further. But I do think it's important to give it a shot and try. At some point, if you simply cannot do it, then you go find someone else who can help you with that. But again, like, I think it's important to give it a shot so you know when you go hire that first person that you have a sort of a sense of at least like what it takes to do what you need done. If you've never programmed at all, how do you hire a programmer? How would you even how would you know how to evaluate somebody? How would you know? You wouldn't know. You would have no idea. So
what do you think about like having like knowing some other tech friend who helps you at least evaluate that person? Would that work? Or
yeah, it would. That's another way to do it, right? Which is if you can't do it, find someone who knows this stuff to help you. Like, yes, I'm kind of trying to give you maybe the ideal situation, which is like you try yourself and you can't figure it out and you go hire someone, but you have a better understanding, similar to like sales. Like if you want to hire a salesperson, do sales for a while for yourself so you can evaluate. You know, it's the same idea. But at some point, if you can't evaluate and need to move faster for whatever reason, find someone else you trust who can help you figure this out. Yes. Yeah.
Then in terms of methodologies, or how would you think about putting that first product out? No, and there's, you said minimal viable product, and there's a bit of, you know, I guess as well some hype around that, and as well, I know you're thinking oftentimes is, you know, just putting slices out there is not really the full experience. So what do you really validate from that? How would you, which advice would you give people that now say, okay, now I know the pain point really well. I now I have found somebody that I want to build the first version with. We're trying to figure out now what's like, what is that first version?
Yeah. Well, this is where we get back to an earlier question you asked, which is about building something for yourself. And when you have the problem that you're trying to solve, you know when the problem goes away. That's your first version. So when we built Basecamp, we needed a better way to keep track of who was doing what. We needed a way to communicate with our clients and get their feedback on their record. And we needed a shared sort of, we call the milestones, set of like dates where things are due. And Basecamp, that's what we needed to do to make our projects run better. So initial version of Basecamp had to-dos for keeping track of who's working on what, milestones for keeping track of key dates, and a message board for keeping track of the communications that we had back and forth. And like once those three things worked, we were done with version 1. That was it. We knew it because we could use it at that point, and it solved the problems that we had. That's the advantage of building something for yourself. When you build something for someone else, you have to, it's very hard to know when you're done with a version 1 or what an MVP would be. I'm not a big fan of the MVP concept. To me, like version 1 is your MVP, like version 1 of the simplest version of the product that does what it needs to do is the first version. And that's the one you put out on the market.
Mhm.
So that's how we do it, but you feel it, gosh, we solved it. What we have here is enough to do what we need to do. That's your version 1.
You now have a very exciting project in the email communication space. How did you decide the version 1 for that, for Hey?
Yeah, Hey is so Hey's our new email service that we launched, hey.com, and that version 1 was based on a bunch of fundamental principles. So I wrote up kind of a 25 things about email that really bug us. And it was kind of like, once we solve those things, because like solving 1 or 2 of them wasn't enough to make it feel like a product. There's more to it. And a lot of these things were integrated with one another. And so like, once we eventually got through the big problems that we had with email, we eventually realized that we feel that we've got this. So it was like the first thing was the screener, which allows you to decide if someone can email you or not. Right now, with every other email service, like anyone can email you, which is sort of good, but sort of not. It's actually not really good at all, because you end up getting emails from people you never want to hear from and you have no control over it. So first we wanted to say, like, I want control over who can email me. So that was step 1. Step 2 is like, where should their email go? Should it go into my inbox, which is like the stuff that's important to me? Should it go into the feed, which is for newsletters and things I want to read later? Should it go into the paper trail, which is like receipts and shipping confirmations and stuff like that? Okay, so we wanted to build these 3 boxes. So now I can control who can email me, and now I can just decide where the emails go. Now, I don't want to get a notification every time someone emails me, unless they're really important people to me. So now we built a notification system. We built like these things around this story that we had this feeling about. And eventually, we had enough of them where once we started using this thing, we're like, I never, ever want to go back to Gmail, ever. And I would go back there occasionally to find some old email, and I go, oh my God, how did I spend 16 years in this other thing? Like, once you get that feeling, you're like, we're there. We got version 1 done. And then you polish it up a little bit, and you got to put prices on it and set up some other stuff. But for the most part, you build it until it solves your problems that you have in your mind, and it all works really well together. And that's your version 1. Version 1 is not all your ideas, though. Version 1 is just the collection of the simplest, fundamental, basic ideas that you want to do. And then all the previous or all the subsequent versions after that are all your ideas. So we're continuing to add to Hey all the time. But version 1 was kind of our enough version.
Mhm.
It's kind of the way to think about
How
it.
long did it take you to actually put it out there, from starting to code on that specific project to version 1?
About 2 years. We started about 2 years before. We didn't know what we were building initially. We were initially going to be building a CRM system, a new version of HighRise, which is our CRM tool. But as we started getting into it, we started realizing that the majority of the features we were excited about were these email-based things. And I started thinking, like, I want to use this tool that we're building for all my email, not just my business email, but all my email. And so we kind of started to veer more towards focusing on email. But all in, it took about 2 years from like the start to the moment we shipped it, which was in June 15th of 2020.
Were there some parts of it like that you showed people in the process then also to get feedback, or so? How do we have to
No.
imagine that customer interaction?
Yeah, we don't show things to people as we go. We build, we show ourselves.
You guys were using it then in terms of communication?
We were using it internally at Basecamp. So there's 2 versions. There's a personal version for personal email, and there's a work version for business email. We've been using both versions. So David and I had been using Hey You. It's called Hey You for the personal version for probably for the past year. So about 6 months prior to when it shipped, we were using it, and the business version shortly after that. So we've been using it a lot internally, and we invited some people on early on, but like not. It was already done. It was essentially done by the time we invited people in. We just hadn't like polished up some of the things. But we're not showing people this thing 2 months in and going, what do you think? What do you think? Because there's nothing to show. It's too early. It's not even, all the ideas aren't there, which is my point about what I don't like about showing people like really unfinished work early is that you're asking someone to evaluate something way out of context. Like, this is not how the final product is going to be. So how can you evaluate 18% of it? It's like, it's just, I'm not a fan of that approach. I know many people are, but personally, I'd rather say like, I believe in this enough that I'm going to build this for myself. I believe in it. I think there's a market here for the product. How do I know? I don't know, but I feel it. And we're going to get it to the point where we're happy to release version 1, cross our fingers, release it to the market and see what happens. Like, that's kind of how we do it. And that's how we've always done it, for better or for worse. But that's our take on it.
And how do you decide what goes in the next version, the next release version?
Well, we decide what happens every 6 weeks. We decide what we're going to work on next. So at Basecamp, we have a system called Shape Up, which is a methodology that we invented for how to work. If you go to basecamp.com/shapeup, SHAPEUP, you can read the book. We wrote a book about it. It's free online, or you can buy a paperback if you want. And this book details how we work. Basically, every 6 weeks, we decide what to work on for the next 6 weeks. So in fact, we have a new cycle, we call it 6-week cycle, starting on January 5th. So on January 5th, we'll begin the next 6 weeks worth of work, which will be predefined. We're working on defining that now. We'll work on those 6 weeks. And when those 6 weeks are up, we'll take 2 weeks of what we call cool down. And during that time, we'll fix a few bugs, we'll tighten a few things up, and we'll work on what we want to work on we'll think about what we want to work on over the next 6 weeks. So we're just deciding 6 weeks at a time. There's no long-term roadmap. There's no big, long list of backlog. I don't believe in that. There's no long list of features we're pulling from. Every 6 weeks, we come up for air, we look around, and we decide what we're going to do next. And that allows us to be really flexible. It allows us to not try to think that we know the future. And it allows new ideas to bubble up. So if I've already set up all my ideas for the next year, that's pretty dismissive of any new ideas I might come up with in April. Like, why should I not pay attention to a new idea in April because I came up with something in January? It doesn't make any sense to me. If I have a new idea in April, let's do it in May, But if you've already set up your whole year and your whole plan, your whole roadmap, then you don't have any time to do new things. I'm not a big fan of that. So I like to kind of make things up as I go, and 6 weeks seems like a good amount of time for that.
Mm-hmm. Super exciting. And in the books as well, we definitely, I strongly encourage people to read those. There's a lot of additional, very useful concepts that are very useful for founders that want to make it real. In terms of, because we're getting towards the end here now. Sure. If you say, okay, I only have 3 minutes left, what would be like your main concept, also where you see a lot of founders struggle with and say, hey, this is a concept that helped me personally a lot, or that I see is extremely useful for people out there that want to make it real?
Yeah. A few things. Number one, we've already covered a couple of these, but build something for yourself. Number two, stay as small as you possibly can. It helps you stay around longer, which is what you need to give yourself a better chance of survival. And the best way to do that is to keep your costs as low as possible for as long as possible. And that's like the fewer people you have, the better shot you have for that. Don't look for outside validation. Don't wait for other people to tell you it's okay to start. It's okay to do this. This is any good. This is any bad. Like, you build the thing that you believe in. You got to have a point of view, and you got to believe in this thing that you're going to make, and you got to put it out there on the market. So try to get to your version 1 relatively quickly, but make sure it solves the problems that you have yourself. And then also, don't plan too far in advance. Don't feel like you need to have your roadmap. We don't have a roadmap at Basecamp. Roadmaps, in my opinion, are a waste of energy, because they lock you. Not only are they a waste of energy, but they prevent you from being flexible, because if you've already got everything,
like cognitive fixation almost, no?
Yeah. It's like, it's fixation, and it's like, this is what we're doing. It's like, well, how do you know what you're going to want to do in 3 months? Like, give yourself options, remain flexible. Those are very, very important things, and you don't have to stress out about it that way too, because if you're trying to figure out like, what is everything we're going to do over the next year, first of all, you're going to get it wrong. Promise you. You're not going to have enough time to do everything you thought you were going to do. Then you're going to feel bad about yourself. Then you're going to be behind the 8 ball. And then you're never going to get to the stuff you want to do the following year, because you're doing the stuff that you the following year that you never finish the first year, and you're always going to be behind in a way that you invented this problem for yourself. There's no reason to invent this problem for yourself. Figure things out as you go. Give yourself enough time. In our opinion, that's about 6 weeks. Every 6 weeks, decide what the next most important set of things to do are, and roll at that cadence. And I think it gives you a lot of flexibility and optionality, which is going to be very beneficial over time.
Fantastic. Another core thing I think where people can learn a lot about you is, in the founders world early on, there are these crazy days working these long hours and so, and you definitely are a very strong proponent of staying very focused on the core things, sticking to, for example, like a 40-hour work week, for example. Any core concepts there as well that you personally use a lot, where you say this is actually one that, especially in the early days, helps you a lot to keep this craziness under control, and that there are so many burning fires, it feels like, and so?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these fires are again, like, man-made. We're creating the chaos that we have to navigate, and a lot of this is based on making long-term decisions we don't need to make, hiring too many people and putting too much pressure on ourselves, and trying to grow and hit targets and hit these goals that we make up and hit these numbers we make up and aim for valuations and take money too early. And now all of a sudden I've got pressure to grow. Like, we create these problems. These problems are not inherent in business. We create a lot of these things for ourselves. Don't create problems.
That's a good personal question as well to always ask. Am I just creating my next?
Yeah, it is actually. It's a great point, Jen. Like, when you're going to make a decision, go like, am I actually creating a problem for myself? Like, what are the problems? I mean, we don't think about this out loud at Basecamp, but we've internalized it. Like, if we make this decision, what problems are we creating for ourselves? Because you always create some problems. Like, everything has its trade-offs. Make sure you know what those are when you make your decisions. Like, if you think like, well, we have to do a roadmap because that's what everyone tells us to do, and now we're going to be like totally focused and know exactly what we're going to do this year. It's like, well, what are the problems you're creating there? Well, maybe you're not going to get everything done that you wished. Now what's going to happen? Maybe you're promising customers things that you can't do. Well, that's going to be hard to do. So then what you end up doing is you end up working crazy hours to try to meet the goals and the estimates you put forward too early, so your customers don't get upset because you made promises. Now you're digging this hole to fill this other hole and digging this hole to fill that hole, and it's like you're just digging deeper holes for yourself. So just think about, whenever you make decisions, what are the trade-offs? What are you taking on? What are the obligations you're creating for yourself down the road? Because the easiest thing to do is to say yes right now to something later on. It takes no effort to go, yeah, I'll do that. And we fall into this trap all the time, even though we know about this. Like, we make promises like in March. It's like, oh, by the end of the year, we'll have this feature done. Like, we'll tell a customer, like, we'll get that done by the end of the year. Here we are, 1 week to go in December, or fewer than that now, like 5 days, 4 days or something. And there's a few things we just didn't get done this year. Now we feel bad about ourselves. We let a customer down. It's like, we didn't have to do that. We could have just said, like, we know this is important and we plan on working on this. We don't know when exactly, but it's definitely important to us. Then we wouldn't be breaking a promise. Then we wouldn't be pushing ourselves at the end of the year when everyone's on vacation. Like, we wouldn't create this calendar date point in time where we're just crunching and feeling bad about it, So think about the promises you're making, and don't create problems for yourself.
Are you using 80/20 a lot, actually, as well? And it's kind of thinking like, what actually is the core, the essence, and so?
Yeah, we try to. I mean, like, everything we build, we try to build like the simplest possible version of it. Like, what does this really need to do? That's kind of the 80%. Like, what does it really, really need to do? And there's other things that it could do. And I think it's very important not to try to build, to assume that like something has to be 100% in order for it to be good enough. 80%, even 60, 70% might be plenty. 30% might be better if it does 0% right now. Like, these are sliding scales with trade-offs, and there's different levels of criticality depending on what it is. And, like, in my opinion, you can't build a product like Basecamp or Hey that doesn't let someone export their data if they want to leave. Like, that's, to me, 100%, that has to exist, okay? But there's other features that don't have to exist in version 1. There's a lot of things that, like, you want that you just don't have yet that you can live without, but you want to get to later. that's fine. But there are certain things you definitely need to have. And that's like, exporting data so people don't feel trapped and some of that stuff. So you want to figure out what those things are, but not everything shouldn't be a requirement.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You have been building exciting projects now for quite some time. What do you personally enjoy most about all of that? What keeps you excited?
I like to make things that don't exist, and I like to sort of poke the world a little bit. So with Hey, for example, like the last time email was exciting was 16 years ago when Gmail launched. I remember when Gmail launched, and I couldn't wait to get a Gmail account, and I was waiting for someone to send me one of the 5 invites they got. It was great. It still is a great product, but it hasn't really changed a whole lot. And I feel like email deserves to be significantly better than it is, and at a fundamental level in all sorts of new ways, and no one else had done it. And so we felt really good about that. That's exciting to us. And we've just gotten started. We've got so many other ideas for Hey and where we're going to take it. The business version is going to be launching shortly. Like that fires us up because we get to continue to poke the world and do new things. Basecamp 4 we're starting to work on that now, which is exciting because Basecamp is our bread and butter, and we have a whole bunch of new ideas for that. So you've got to want to make I also want these things. Like I want Basecamp 4 because I know what it's going to be. I want it for our own company. I want some of these new features for Hey that we're going to be building. I want this stuff. So that keeps you excited because you want these things to exist in the world. But also I just enjoy seeing people grow and seeing our team get better and seeing people who've been here for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, like take on more responsibility. So there's an excitement about like being even more and more hands off and letting other people grow into roles is kind of fun to watch as well. And also like to just keep doing it for a long time is also exciting. Like how long can we do this for? That's kind of a fun thing.
I'm sure as well there's no some as well maybe tricky days and so where it's not all sun and shining and this energy excitement. Any advice for those days, for the dark days, the early founders days that are dark, where you feel like, oh my God, like what are we
Oh, there's so many of those, and not only the early days. There's always like, I let me make sure I'm not painting an inaccurate picture here. I don't love my job all the time. I don't love it a lot of the times. I like it a lot. I don't always love it. There are days where I'd rather be doing something else. There are days when I contemplate quitting or retiring. I mean, this is just the human existence. There's no rosy picture every single day. The point is that which direction are you pointing? What is your general trajectory? Like, again, what are the trade-offs? If I didn't do this, I'd have to go get another job or start another business. I don't want to start another business and I don't want to get another job. So like, this is actually pretty good. And I like it most of the time, a lot, and there's certain moments when I really, really love it. And there's enough of those still that makes me want to keep going. And I love independence. So we don't, we can do whatever we want, however we want to do it. That's such a rare thing. And I really appreciate that we still have independence, full independence, which is really rare. And I don't want to give that up. So like, as far as the dark days, like just recognize that you're going to have them. No matter how successful you are, you're going to have them. The most successful people in the world have them. The people that build the biggest businesses in the world have them. Like, that's just life. So I think that's the best thing to think through is like, some days, even when it's bad, it could be worse. And other days when it's great, it could be better. Like, just, you got to keep fundamentally like enjoying and finding the work challenging and intellectually stimulating and creatively stimulating. It's not so much that you have to love it, but you have to feel like you're excited to a certain degree to do it most of the time. The other thing I would say is if you're unhappy about something at work, step back for a second and reflect on what you're doing. Like when I'm unhappy at work, I'm usually like dealing with paperwork, which I don't like to do, or I'm dealing with like some staff issues, like personality conflicts, which I don't like dealing with those things. But when I'm really working on the product and thinking about design and thinking about how something should work and how something should look and writing about those are the things I love. So if I'm unhappy doing the things I really love, then I've got a problem. But if I'm unhappy doing the things I don't like so much, that's just probably reality. And I know like I'm not going to be doing paperwork all the time. I'm not going to be dealing with staff issues all the time. So when I run into it and I deal with it. And then I know that will move on and I'll be able to get back to the things I really enjoy doing most of the time.
Wonderful. Jason, thanks so much for taking the time and sharing all these extremely helpful insights, and all the best for Hey and Basecamp, and for you as well. No, as the journey, I hope we have another one coming up in the future. There's many more exciting topics, but for now, thanks so much for joining again.
Anytime. It's really great to see you again, and hopefully we'll get to see each other in person within the next year or so.
Absolutely. Looking
Good luck
forward
to
to
you.
that.
Yeah, me too. See you.
All the best.
Okay, you too.